Hey everybody, Realm Builder Guy here, and welcome back to the channel. So today's video is possibly a little controversial. Oh boy, don't want to go there. I'm going to talk to you about running TTRPG campaigns that matter, campaigns that are meaningful, and what that even means, how to do it, how not to do it, which systems work, and some things to keep in mind. So first, I need to talk about what I mean with a campaign that matters. And that is, of course, talking about, is it meaningful? And how do we define meaningful? Now, granted, this could be subjective, but maybe not as subjective as you think. You know, something to be meaningful, in my opinion, is it's memorable, especially in a gaming sense. So, when we think of what is memorable, it's things we talk about for years, not just days, moments, weeks, or even months, but literally years, maybe even decades after they happen. And, you have those moments in your general life that you remember that are memorable and meaningful that you share with friends and family. In games, those are harder to come by because games are pastimes that come and go and moments are fleeting. And it's, for a lot of people, a diversion and something fun to do, but it really doesn't leave a lasting memory amongst you and your friends for years or decades. So when I talk about it being meaningful and memorable, I'm going to show you a few examples here. But first, I'm going to diverge away from role-playing games to kind of show you what I mean. So to start with board games. Now, you can have a lot of fun playing games like Seven Wonders, Monopoly, Rummy Cube, whatever. You have a lot of fun. Are they memorable? No, it's not really memorable. It's not something you're going to talk about for years. Remember when that happened? Remember when I built that library in Seven Wonders? Whoa, mind-blowing. No, it's a fun game. I really enjoy playing it, but it's not memorable. Now we take a game that I truly love, Machiavelli. And if you don't know what Machiavelli is, it's an old Avalon Hill game that I absolutely love that is essentially a derivative of Diplomacy, the game that's worldwide famous also for breaking up friendships. Machiavelli kind of takes that and brings it into Renaissance Italy and dials it up with more factions at the table than in your standard Diplomacy game. Now, this is a memorable type game. Why? Because yeah, you have rules, you have certain things you can and can't do. But where the memorable part kind of comes in is the fact that it is so open as far as how you play it. So it's not like Monopoly where it's pretty cut and dry. Here, the action then often happens off the table. So talking with other players, coming up with plans, alliances, backstabbing, and seeing, oh, they're talking to that faction now. What could they be thinking about? Maybe I should talk about to this faction. And that's where it becomes truly an epic type of game and is memorable. I still have, I'm older now, I'm in my 40s, but my friends and I, we still talk about a Machiavelli game that we played for my 26th birthday, and full table at a local game store, pizza night, playing this, and it was 6 hours, and it was a blast, and it was memorable. Now, if we go to tabletop miniature wargaming, sure, you can have a lot of fun with Warhammer 40K or any other war game. You get together, you play a game, you fight a battle or a scenario. Good times were had. Fun. I enjoy that as well. But it's not memorable. You're not really going to remember that. But if you link these scenarios into a campaign, or you actually have faction play and reconnaissance and disturbing each other's lines of supply and things like that, on top of then meeting on the table and fighting out based on things that happened in a previous battle, as well as the machinations and maneuverings in between the battles, and you don't actually determine exactly when the battle is going to happen in a predetermined way, those campaigns are deeply meaningful and memorable. And that is the exact same thing with a tabletop role-playing game. So now we've defined in terms of meaningfulness what that is, and doing something that matters. Now, how do we translate that into a role-playing game? And this is kind of where somebody said, "Oh, maybe you should title this video how to run an epic role-playing game campaign." No. It's about a meaningful one that truly matters. And you may think you've played meaningful campaigns, but the true depth of the meaningfulness, okay, of a campaign, you really get it when you run campaigns in this type of fashion. So what does that mean? That means they are open-ended. There's no end in sight for this campaign. It could end. Usually these could end because people move away or there's less interest or whatever, life gets in your way. But there's no predetermined plot. They are completely emergent at the table based upon player agency and player decisions, how they move and shape the world, the factions they create, the factions they get involved in, and how what they do changes the sandbox of the world landscape. Those are some of the things you have to run a meaningful campaign. You can't do that if it's all tied into a preconceived style of play, loop, or adventure path that has a defined beginning, middle, and end, almost like a pre-written story. Also, I believe it needs to be long-term. That typical, a campaign lasts 6 sessions type thing, that's not a campaign, that's an adventure. That's maybe a longer adventure, but that's not a campaign. I also don't believe an adventure path is a campaign. It's an adventure. It's a path of linked adventures, or it's one long adventure to get players from level 1 to level 20, or just to advance them along the predetermined storyline. And you can wrap that up relatively quickly. Now, I know there are some that are super long, but for the most part, you definitely need a longer term play to make it meaningful, i.e. memorable. Short stuff comes and goes. If you're running this for a few months, ideally a few years, in the grand scale, decades, but that may be a little utopic for most of us, but at least a few years, the memorable moments accrue over that time to give the campaign its meaningfulness. It also becomes a campaign that matters when players make the commitment to be there on time. Now, I don't believe a monthly game can get you this type of verisimilitude and immersion. It definitely needs to be weekly or every other week, to be honest, is perfectly sufficient. At minimum, you want to have two to three sessions per month. Monthly isn't going to work for this, because too much time lapses in between sessions and you start forgetting things, and just the way our brains function, it won't be memorable. With that comes the commitment from players. Now, one of the people I really value is Alexander Macrease, who wrote Arbiter of Worlds, a great book on being a game master. Also, Adventure Conquer King System, which is an absolutely fantastic, old school type-ish tabletop role-playing game that I highly recommend everybody check out. But anyway, he talks about people make commitments to go to the gym, to go to a sporting event, to meet up to play poker, things like that. You need to make a commitment to your tabletop role-playing campaign and carve out those hours. If you're not able or willing to do that because And I've seen the horrible videos about this saying, "Oh, it just puts so much anxiety on me that I have to do it. And then because I have to be there, I'm not having fun." Well, that says a lot more about you than the game or anything, or maybe the environment that's been created around the campaign. But I don't know a lot of players that think that way when they're having fun and they are playing a meaningful campaign that matters. So make the commitment, especially because your GM is putting in a lot more time and commitment to you as the player. So now I've kind of defined the type of campaign that adds meaningfulness and that make it matter. Now we got to talk a little bit about system because not every role-playing game system supports running a meaningful campaign that matters and can go in the long term. Game systems that work are really any version of Chaosium's BRP. So be that Mithras, BRP itself, RuneQuest, Pendragon, or the Free League semi-derivative thereof, Dragonbane. All of these allow for a shorter power progression, so you're able to stay with your character at those power thresholds that they go through longer. Now, obviously, BRP is skill-based game. Traveler is another great one, kind of like this, but it's not BRP. Adds for more granularity and a shorter growth. Other games you can look at here are quite a few from Free League themselves. Big fan of Forbidden Lands, as well as the One Ring that allow this more subtle, granular, slower progression. Of course, I already mentioned Traveler. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is another one, and then another personal favorite of mine is Rolemaster, especially Rolemaster 2nd Edition, over the stuff that's out there right now. Against the Dark Master, another great one that I can throw in there. Those all really work great. Now, what are bad choices or less than optimal choices for this type of campaign? Well, rules light. And by rules light, I mean things that are super, super bare bone. Because as you're playing a long-term campaign, you as the person running it, as the GM, have to make more rulings, come up with more house rules, and it becomes burdensome. That isn't something you always want to have to work on. Instead, you want a system that already has that, and you can add some of the edge case rulings and house rules to it and some minor tweaks over the long haul versus coming up with entire wholesale systems to accommodate this type of play. Next, and I cannot stress this enough, anything powered by the apocalypse or anything close to that. I've played quite a few of them, also Blades in the Dark for quite a while, and the reason why they aren't good for this type of play is because they do not allow emergent player choices, really. It's far too prescribed in the way you have to play your characters to allow for an emergent play style to come over the long term. They're also not really made for long-term play. I've played enough of them. If you enjoy PBTA games, great for you. I don't, because they don't allow this type of play. Also because the characters can't progress in the game world at a slower pace and allow the game world to progress properly in that sense. It's not made for that. It's made for a different type of game, a type of game that I don't enjoy. You might, great for you. It's not for me, and it's definitely not for running campaigns that matter. So now, of course, we need to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. I've talked about non-D&D. Well, D&D, which D&D editions or versions or systems work for this type of campaign? Well, we got to talk about, of course, the current 5th edition or 5.5 or whatever the heck it's being called. Yeah, no, it's not great for this. I have done it. I have run multi-year campaigns with 5th edition, but I also had to write 20 pages of supplemental rules. Why? Because the game is not built for this type of game. It's simply not. It means it is designed to run adventure paths and progress players maybe to 8th level. Maybe, because after that, the game completely falls apart. I would say Pathfinder 2nd Edition is way more robust at higher levels, but it too is primarily designed for running Paizo pre-published adventure paths. And again, that's not what this is, because there's a story, a plot arc that you're playing through. And yeah, that is counter to running a campaign that is meaningful and that matters. Again, you can do it. You're going to have to do a lot more work. So what games do work? What D&D games? Well, first of all, Castles and Crusades. You know I'm a huge fan. It is perfect for this type of game. And I've got a few videos talking about Castles and Crusades, and I'll have more as well here on the channel in future, of course, because I absolutely love that game because it facilitates this type of play. Then, of course, older editions. I will say, D&D 3.5 / Pathfinder 1st Edition can absolutely work for this game. It's a lot of work. You got to change a little bit on the XP side. It can't just be about monster killing. But overall, it works because there's more granularity in that game. It's a much slower rate of progression than 5th edition or Pathfinder 2nd edition is. So I believe that one, if you're not going to go back into TSR era D&D and you still want a D&D edition that you have on your shelf, 3.5 or Pathfinder 1st edition could work for this, but it's not ideal. So what is ideal? Ideal is really anything published pre-WotC or a derivative thereof. And by derivative thereof, I mean, of course, retro clones like Osric, Swords and Wizardry, Old School Essentials. Then games like Hyperborea or Basic Fantasy. These really help facilitate this type of play. And then, of course, the classics themselves. Original Dungeons & Dragons. Basic D&D. BX, but specifically BECME. I would say BECME or Rule Cyclopedia is much better for this type of campaign, even than BX. You can do it with BX, but BECME was more designed for that, or Rule Cyclopedia, because you also have a lot of stuff that goes into more detailed domain play and warfare and higher level progression. So I'd say BECME Rule Cyclopedia better than BX or Holmes Basic, because Holmes Basic only goes, for the first few levels. And then you're supposed to jump to, really the ideal game for this, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, 1st or 2nd edition. Both work perfectly for this. I tend to run a mishmash of the two because there's stuff that 2nd edition does better than 1st edition that I like, and stuff in 1st edition that I prefer over 2nd edition. If you're ever interested, let me know in the comments, and I can do videos about both AD&D 1st and AD&D 2nd edition, the likes, the dislikes, and some of the similarities I see there. So those are great for that. So those are the systems I recommend you take a look at. And why? Why? Because slower power progression. You need that. You need to ruminate. You need to spend time with your character at their various power tiers, power levels, to really get a feel for them, to really appreciate them, and to have more that living campaign feel behind it, to have the world progress in a more, dare I say, somewhat realistic, but game-specific type of way. You can also have a larger passage of time in game world with this. I'm not going to talk about using one-on-one time. I'll do that in a separate video and how I implement one-to-one time. But you can have years pass because, one, BRP games, it takes a longer time to progress. I really love the training rules in RuneQuest 2nd Edition. I will do a video about RuneQuest 2nd Edition eventually, because that's my favorite version of RuneQuest so far. And the training rules in AD&D that allow for more time passage in the world. The travel rules of the One Ring. All of these things, so they allow your character to age and the world to move forward. Pendragon, fantastic game for this because it's actually built for years, in-world generations of play. And that makes sure that you don't end up with the exact same character that you started with. Because if you did, and I've heard this many, many times, Professor DM said this, and it's absolutely true. If at the end of the campaign, you got everything you wanted, and you're with the same character, basically, in concept, as you started with, you really didn't have a meaningful campaign that mattered. So we've talked about systems, we've defined what the campaign should kind of look like. What about the player characters themselves? What kind of player characters do you need for this? Well, you need that old trope that I have heard people call boring, and that is the zero to hero, or I prefer to call it zero to legend approach. Axe is perfect at this. It even says it in there: adventurer, conquer, king. Your progression as a character. So going from the lonely adventurer to someone who starts to mold and impact the world to someone who becomes deeply meaningful and impactful to the world. And you do that organically through the growth. So really, you need that zero to hero arc. If you already want to start at a high power level, like arguably 5th edition D&D, Pathfinder 2nd edition does, then this isn't right for you. Then something like 13th Age is significantly better for you and does that. If you already want to start as, Super Conan, then that's probably the best bet for you to do. This isn't built for that. This type of meaningful campaign doesn't really support that you already start powerful, because that's not meaningful. You were just handed that from the start. You didn't earn it through the actions that and the choices you as the player made. It's the build, I hate that term, that you threw together for this game. The other thing is, and this kind of links into system, and for players, the system can't mitigate mistakes. So it needs to allow you to be able to fail and to die unheroically. One of my favorite campaigns I ran for a few years was Symbaroum. And we had some, let's call them heroic deaths, some very dramatic deaths. And then we had some that were really not overly heroic at all. One of my players, friend of mine, of course, his player, his PC died, and he had a lot of character death in this campaign, and long will he be remembered for it. It died to a swarm of crystal flies. And that's because he had a couple of bad rolls, and then he couldn't get out of the death spiral. And then on top of that, the only healer that could have helped him was suffering from hypothermia because of the weather and him failing another roll where they got wet. And so basically he was disadvantaged on his roll to try to heal. That was his one time where he could do it. The one attempt, he failed. And then the guy who got attacked by the swarm of crystal flies, also because he essentially fell off his horse, died. It was super memorable, extraordinarily memorable, but not heroic, not meaningful. I also saw, this is a few years ago, the horrible advice that PC death needs to be like heroically memorable. No, or meaningful is what they said. Heroic and meaningful. No, it doesn't need to be meaningful in the sense that they meant like it moves the story forward. No, not at all. In a meaningful campaign, in a campaign that matters, these characters can die completely unheroically. To quicksand, to poison, something like that, or a swarm of crystal flies on the edges of the forest of Davokar. And that makes it memorable. We will all remember that. We don't remember every character death in that campaign, but man, we remembered that one because of everything, all the choices the players made, and all the bad luck that they went through. Also because I make my players roll for weather, by the way, so they can't blame me. And that's a player-facing system, so they can't blame me for the things that happen in that sense, especially in that sequence. But man, was it memorable, meaning it's meaningful, meaning it was a campaign that mattered. So there you have it. That is my formula for running role-playing game campaigns that matter, that are meaningful. I'm sure I ruffled a few feathers, and that's totally fine. Been doing this for a long time. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you have any questions, of course, I'm probably going to get some angry comments. That's totally fine too. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And there are also things down in the comment section where you can support the channel on Patreon or buy me a coffee. And until next time, I'm Rambler Guy, and I will talk to you soon.